Floor, and you know what I'm talking about here on my channel right now.
There are celebrity controversies, there are legal battles, and then there are situations that become so tangled that even people who originally supported one side begin stepping forward to question what is happening. That appears to be exactly where the Blake Lively controversy has landed. For months, public discussion surrounding Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni has moved through countless twists and turns. Headlines have come and gone, legal filings have been dissected, social media has exploded with opinions, and fans have spent endless hours debating who deserves sympathy and who deserves criticism. Yet one of the most surprising developments did not come from a Hollywood insider, a gossip columnist, or even one of the attorneys directly involved in the case. Instead, it came from someone whose name is connected to a law that was specifically designed to protect survivors from retaliation. When the very person who helped create a law begins expressing concern about how that law is being used, people naturally start paying attention. The issue at the center of the conversation is not simply whether Blake Lively was right or wrong in her accusations. The debate has expanded far beyond that. The discussion now involves the purpose of legal protections, the difference between genuine victim advocacy and public relations campaigns, and whether powerful celebrities should be treated the same as ordinary individuals when laws intended to protect vulnerable people are applied. These questions are becoming impossible to ignore. According to reports and interviews that have surfaced, the architect behind California's survivor protection legislation expressed serious concerns regarding how the law was being invoked in Blake Lively's legal strategy. That statement alone immediately drew attention because this is not a random observer offering a hot take. This is someone who spent years fighting to establish protections for people who lacked the resources necessary to defend themselves against retaliation and intimidation. To understand why these comments created such a stir, it is important to understand the original purpose behind the legislation. The law was not designed with Hollywood megastars in mind. It was not created for individuals with multi-million-dollar fortunes, elite legal teams, extensive public relations networks, and access to virtually unlimited resources. Instead, the legislation was intended to help ordinary people who found themselves in impossible situations. Imagine an employee working for a powerful company. Imagine that employee witnessing misconduct and deciding to speak out. Historically, the risks associated with speaking out have been enormous. Many whistleblowers and victims have found themselves facing devastating consequences. They may lose their jobs. They may become the target of smear campaigns. They may face expensive legal threats. Even if they are ultimately correct, the process itself can destroy them financially and emotionally. That imbalance of power was exactly what lawmakers and advocates hoped to address. The goal was to prevent powerful individuals and organizations from using the legal system as a weapon against people who lacked the resources to fight back. In theory, the law provides a shield. It tells potential victims that they do not have to remain silent simply because someone wealthier or more influential might try to bury them under legal expenses. The architect of the law reportedly explained that this protection was never intended to become a strategic public relations tool. Instead, it was supposed to serve as a safeguard for people who genuinely needed assistance. That distinction matters because the entire controversy revolves around whether Blake Lively fits the category of person the legislation was designed to protect. Critics argue that she does not. Their reasoning is straightforward. Blake Lively is one of the most recognizable actresses in Hollywood. She possesses enormous financial resources. She has access to some of the best legal representation available. She has publicists, industry connections, media influence, and a massive fan base. These advantages place her in a dramatically different position than the average person the legislation was intended to help. This argument gained momentum after observers began examining how the legal battle unfolded. Many critics point to the fact that several of Blake Lively's claims encountered significant challenges as the case progressed. Allegations that initially generated explosive headlines reportedly became more complicated when additional evidence emerged. Witness testimony, documentation, and legal rulings created an environment in which many observers began questioning the strength of the accusations. One example that received considerable attention involved claims surrounding a childbirth scene. According to public discussions, allegations were made suggesting inappropriate conduct connected to an individual participating in a filming sequence. Critics later pointed toward evidence indicating that important contextual details had been omitted or misrepresented. Whether one agrees with that interpretation or not, the controversy contributed to growing skepticism among members of the public. The result was a shift in perception. At the beginning of many celebrity controversies, public opinion often forms quickly. Initial accusations create powerful emotional reactions. However, as additional information emerges, those reactions can change dramatically. In this case, a substantial number of people who initially leaned toward believing Blake Lively reportedly became less certain after reviewing court filings, media reports, and legal developments. That changing perception created a public relations problem. Once doubts begin to emerge, every subsequent action is viewed through a different lens. Decisions that might have seemed reasonable at the beginning of a controversy suddenly attract greater scrutiny. Statements become subject to harsher criticism. Motives are questioned. Intentions are analyzed. This brings us back to the concerns expressed by the creator of the survivor protection law. During interviews discussing the situation, she reportedly emphasized that her primary concern involved preserving the integrity of the legislation. Laws created to protect vulnerable people depend heavily on public trust. If the public begins viewing such laws as tools that can be manipulated by wealthy and powerful individuals, confidence in those protections may erode. That possibility worries many advocates. Consider what happens if an ordinary victim is considering whether to come forward with allegations against a powerful employer. The individual may already be terrified. They may fear retaliation. They may fear public humiliation. They may fear financial ruin. Now imagine that the law designed to protect them becomes associated with a celebrity controversy that many people view negatively. Opponents of survivor protections could use that controversy to argue that the law is being abused. Future efforts to strengthen protections could encounter greater resistance. The entire purpose of the legislation could become overshadowed by a high-profile dispute involving individuals whose circumstances bear little resemblance to those of ordinary victims. This concern appears to be at the heart of the criticism. The issue is not necessarily whether Blake Lively should have legal rights. Of course she should. Every person deserves access to legal protections. The issue is whether invoking a law designed for vulnerable individuals makes sense when the person invoking it possesses extraordinary wealth, influence, and power. Supporters of Blake Lively would likely argue that victimhood is not determined by bank account size. A wealthy person can still experience harassment, discrimination, or mistreatment. Financial success does not create immunity from harm. That argument has merit. The law should not deny protection simply because someone is famous. However, critics respond by pointing out that the legislation was specifically created to address power imbalances. In their view, Blake Lively was not the less powerful party. They argue that she entered the dispute with significantly more influence than Justin Baldoni. From that perspective, applying the legislation to her situation appears inconsistent with its original intent. The disagreement highlights a broader question that extends far beyond this specific case. How should society define power? Is power purely financial? Is it determined by celebrity status? Is it measured through media influence? Is it based on professional authority? These questions rarely have simple answers. A person may be wealthy but vulnerable in one context. Another person may possess less money but greater authority within a specific environment. Power shifts depending on circumstances. Determining who truly holds the advantage can be surprisingly.
As the controversy continued growing, another issue began attracting attention. The difference between legal victories, public relations victories, and the way both are presented to the public. Those three things are often treated as if they are the same, but in reality they can be completely different. A person can win in the court of public opinion while losing in an actual courtroom. Someone else can technically win a legal battle while suffering major reputational damage. Then there are situations where neither side truly wins because both parties emerge from the conflict with damaged reputations, exhausted resources, and years of negative publicity attached to their names. Many observers began suggesting that the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni dispute was heading toward that third category. One of the recurring criticisms centered on messaging. Throughout the public discussion, many people felt they were being asked to accept certain conclusions before all of the evidence had been examined. Initially, there was tremendous pressure across social media and entertainment media outlets to immediately pick a side. That pressure is not unusual. Modern celebrity culture often rewards instant reactions rather than careful analysis. Headlines are written within minutes. Opinions form within hours. Entire narratives are established before facts have been fully reviewed. Once those narratives become established, changing them becomes extremely difficult, even when new information emerges. For some observers, this was exactly what happened. They felt the public was encouraged to accept a specific story from the very beginning. When conflicting evidence later surfaced, those same observers became increasingly frustrated. They began asking why certain facts received extensive coverage while other facts seemed to receive much less attention. Whether that criticism is fair depends largely on one's perspective, but it undeniably became a major part of the conversation. The frustration grew stronger as legal developments unfolded. Courtroom proceedings tend to be less emotional and more methodical than social media debates. Judges evaluate legal standards. Attorneys argue procedural issues. Evidence is scrutinized carefully. As various rulings emerged, many people started comparing those rulings to the public narrative that had dominated earlier coverage. The differences were impossible to ignore. Critics argued that some media organizations had been far too eager to present allegations as established facts. Supporters countered that reporting on allegations is not the same as declaring guilt. The disagreement reflected a broader problem that exists whenever high-profile accusations become public. Journalists must report developments as they occur, yet audiences often interpret reporting itself as an endorsement of one side. This tension became even more visible when discussions shifted toward the purpose of survivor protection laws. The architect of the legislation repeatedly emphasized that the law was intended to help individuals who might otherwise be silenced through fear and financial pressure. In her view, the legislation existed because ordinary people frequently face impossible odds when confronting powerful adversaries. The legal system can be expensive. Litigation can take years. Many victims decide to remain silent simply because defending themselves would cost more than they can afford. That reality motivated the creation of the law. The concern now was that if the law became associated with celebrity disputes involving multimillionaires, its original purpose could become obscured. Instead of being viewed as a shield for vulnerable people, it might begin being viewed as a strategic tool used by the rich and famous. For advocates who spent years fighting for these protections, that possibility represented a serious threat. Many people listening to the interview found that argument persuasive. They understood the distinction being made. Nobody was saying that celebrities should be denied legal protections. Rather, the question was whether a law designed to address extreme power imbalances should be applied in situations where those imbalances appear far less obvious. Another topic that generated discussion involved influence within the entertainment industry itself. Hollywood power does not always operate in straightforward ways. Outsiders often assume that producers hold all the power or that directors control everything. In reality, influence can come from many sources. Major stars often possess enormous leverage. Their participation can determine whether projects receive financing. Their names attract media attention. Their social connections open doors. Their public image can shape the success or failure of entire productions. Critics of Blake Lively argued that she possessed exactly this kind of influence. They pointed to her career, her celebrity status, and her extensive industry relationships. From their perspective, portraying her as powerless simply did not match reality. They viewed her as one of the most powerful figures involved in the dispute. Supporters disagreed. They argued that workplace dynamics can be complicated and that influence in one area does not automatically eliminate vulnerability in another. A person may have fame and money while still experiencing situations they perceive as inappropriate or harmful. According to this view, focusing exclusively on celebrity status risks oversimplifying a much more nuanced situation. The disagreement demonstrated how difficult it can be to discuss power honestly. People tend to define power differently depending on their experiences and political beliefs. Some focus on financial resources. Others focus on institutional authority. Still others emphasize social influence or public visibility. Because there is no universally accepted definition, debates about power often become endless. Meanwhile, public trust remained a central issue. The creator of the law repeatedly returned to the same basic concern: preserving confidence in protections intended for genuine victims. Her fear appeared to be that controversial applications could undermine years of advocacy work. If the public begins believing that survivor protections are being exploited, support for those protections may weaken. That outcome could ultimately harm the very people the legislation was designed to help. Many legal experts have expressed similar concerns in unrelated contexts. Laws are often judged not only by how they function but by how they are perceived. A handful of highly publicized cases can shape public opinion far more than thousands of ordinary cases that receive little attention. This means that celebrity controversies sometimes have consequences extending far beyond the individuals directly involved. As the legal discussion continued, attention also turned toward the role of public relations. Modern celebrity disputes rarely remain confined to courtrooms. Public statements, interviews, social media campaigns, and media coverage all become part of the battle. Some commentators argued that public relations had become almost as important as legal strategy. In fact, they suggested that controlling the narrative was often treated as a separate objective entirely. This perception fueled skepticism among many observers. Whenever legal arguments appeared alongside aggressive public messaging, critics wondered whether the primary goal was justice or image management. Supporters responded that public figures have every right to defend themselves publicly, especially when facing intense scrutiny. Again, there were no easy answers. The controversy also highlighted the growing gap between ordinary people and celebrities. One reason so many individuals reacted strongly to the discussion surrounding survivor protections was that they compared their own lives to the circumstances being described. Most people cannot hire elite attorneys. Most people cannot rely on extensive public relations teams. Most people do not have millions of followers willing to defend them online. As a result, some members of the public struggled to relate to claims that a major celebrity needed special protection from legal intimidation. Whether that reaction is fair or not, it became a significant factor in shaping public opinion. Throughout all of this, commentary from media personalities continued influencing the discussion. Among them was Hari, whose analysis attracted attention because it focused heavily on the gap between the law's intended purpose and its application in this particular situation. Hari repeatedly argued that the legislation was created to protect individuals facing overwhelming disadvantages, not individuals possessing extraordinary resources and influence. According to that perspective, the controversy was never solely about Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni. Instead, it was about the future credibility of protections designed for ordinary people. If those protections become associated with high-profile celebrity disputes, opponents may use those examples to challenge the legislation itself. That concern resonated with many viewers because it shifted the conversation away from personalities and toward principles. Rather than asking which celebrity was more sympathetic, it encouraged people to think about how legal protections function and whom they are intended to serve. As weeks passed, another interesting development emerged. Some individuals who initially supported Blake Lively began expressing uncertainty. This did not necessarily mean they switched sides completely. Instead, they became less confident in their original assumptions. Additional information had created enough doubt that they no longer felt comfortable viewing the situation in purely black and white terms. This shift reflected